side, but really seeing a lot of stress on the multifamily side. A lot of people who don't really have a lot of experience in multifamily have gotten out there and their projections were just wrong. I mean, there's only so many times you can keep raising rents. And the problem is the expenses on multifamily are growing 2 and 3 times faster than rents are. So there's an erosion of NOI. And yeah, I mean, I think that you're going to see a lot of that both in multifamily and some other property types. But I agree with you. I think Q1, Q2, I think you'll really start seeing some people barely hanging on certain projects. Not everywhere. There's still some markets out there that are just doing phenomenal. Sure. And the market's bailing them out, but there's a lot of the United States where the market's just not growing fast enough to bail anybody out.
It's funny because there's distress in the asset, like you said, underperforming based on projections. And then there's great performing assets, but terrible debt, distress in the debt. And that to me is more where we're going in the next 12 months, I think. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's just going to be debt terms due. It could be a great, really, really good asset. It's performing well. It's fully occupied. The rents are hitting projections, but there's a 2, 3, or whatever, 100 basis points increase in the cap rate compared to what you thought it would be. So you're not getting the price and you leverage to 80, 85%, whatever it might be. And you can't get out of the debt unless you do a call in. So,
and most people who were not in the 08, 09, 2010 era, like I was, and a lot of other people in GoBundance were, they'll tell you that, man, a lot of people lost their properties, not because they couldn't pay the note, but because their loan covenants were broken. Their debt coverage ratios weren't hitting the minimum debt coverage ratio. The LTVs weren't, at the minimum of or maximum of 80%. And when the banks and the special servicers come to the borrowers, it doesn't matter whether that real estate's performing or not. A lot of times you have a valuation problem, not necessarily a cash problem. But if it's determined that your loan covenants are not being met and the bank asks you to recapitalize the note and you don't have it, then they can put you in technical default, whether you're paying.
Oh, that's interesting. So you come in at a 1.1 debt service coverage ratio when the target is 1.2 or 1.25.
Yeah.
The bank could proactively.
You could be in technical default right at that moment. So
interesting. What's the incentive on the bank for the bank to go after that? Why would the bank want to repossess or try to force the sale of that asset?
Most of the times this isn't, your local community bank. It's going to be more of your CMBS life companies and that sort of thing. And that's just a requirement to make a loan. Now, if they think it's a temporary issue, they may come back and say, hey, we'll give you 3 to 6 months to work it out. If it's a permanent issue, like, hey, you just paid too much for this asset 2 years ago, and rates are now up 200 basis points, and so cap rates are going to be up a certain, there's not a dollar per dollar correlation, but there is a correlation, right? Just like everybody made all that money 4 and 5 years ago from cap rate compression, right? Yeah. Rates went down, cap rates went down. But when you talk to sellers about, well, rates are up, cap rates should be up. Well, that's not how it works. Well, that's how it worked when it went down. And so when, it's funny, man, because it just depends on what side of the ledger you're on as to how your viewpoint is. But I've done a lot of lender work and man, have been in bad spots myself, by the way. I've been on the other side where the banks told me that my LTV wasn't enough. And by the way, you have to submit your financials to your bank and your lenders all the time. They know where you're sitting on cash. And I watched what I thought was enough cash to last a lifetime, lasted about 6 months in 08 and 09. And, the banks left me alone after they basically raked all the cash out of my accounts, and then they just started leaving me alone. So, but that's what they did, right? When banks need to deleverage, they use that opportunity of your loan covenants not being met, and they know you're sitting there with $1 million, $1.5 million in cash, and they need to deleverage. Well, that's their way to deleverage you. Deleverage themselves and deleverage your asset at the same time is to make you burn some of that cash to put your loan covenants in compliance with the term of the note.
That's interesting. That's so interesting. So is it fair to say that a bank, a community bank or whatever, might do an audit and say, hey, okay, this asset performing at a whatever below DSCR, that's just what I'm stuck on, and look, in their account is X? Or is it because of the disclosure they know how much you have in cash? In other words, can you avoid it or protect yourself a bit by just not keeping the cash in the same bank that you have to serve the loan with.
Well, no, I mean, because that's another thing we learned in the 08, 09 is, and anybody watching this that's my age or was in real estate is probably laughing, global debt obligations. So when you submit your personal financial statements, which you're required to do,
sure,
according to your note, at least once a year, and sometimes they'll ask for more than that once, sometimes back in 08 and 09 and 2010, I think I was submitting my financial statements quarterly along with my global debt obligations. So the bank's not only concerned with my project and that debt on that project, but they're concerned with what other projects do I have that are also not meeting the debt coverage ratio, that are also struggling or have negative cash flow. Because so if the banks think that that you've got other projects that are going to eat into or burn your cash, then they're going to stake claim on that cash as well. So that's how they know that you're sitting on cash. If you're submitting personal financial statements that are true and correct, they're going to show where you have money, regardless of whether it's in their bank or not.
This stuff is just, I backdoored Forrest Gumped my way into a situation where our assets are all low loan to value, long-term debt, which is good, which makes now learning this from you, because I hadn't heard it put this way before, makes me feel so much better. But I'll admit, very easily, like many guys, I could have been pulled in as a GP raising capital for a 3-year bridge loan at 78% loan to value on an A-class asset that, hopefully the rates don't climb in the time in which we owe this. Hopefully it's like the 2017 to 2020, not 21 to 24 kind of thing. But it does give me hey, whoever was looking down, to partner with a guy in Mark Henteman, who's a GoBundance guy. Who's been around 20 years doing this and understands these variables, who survived 08. Because everything we buy is 55, 60, 65% loan to value. Total portfolio is in that range. Maybe it's less now because values have compressed a bit, but we're still well within our debt coverage ratio, well within our covenants, if you will. So that's so interesting. God, that helps me sleep at night. So thanks for that.
Oh, absolutely. And and I think
thanks for tuning in. If you want to hear this entire episode, the audio links are down below. But if you want to see another episode that we think you would enjoy on this channel, click right here.